the website, we intend to do that. We've set out a full programme, including outlawing fire and rehire, 0 hours contracts, campaigning for shorter working time, and fighting back. This is a rally where speeches will be shorter than normal, so I'm going to kick off by introducing our good friend and comrade, Sarah Woolley, the General Secretary of the Bakers and Food and Allied Workers Union, and Sarah's going to talk to us about the work that her union has been doing, I think, on organising and campaigning in fast food. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Tony, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. I will touch a bit on fast food, but I want to speak a bit about the work that we've been doing on the right to food, if that's okay. The last 12 months seems to have flown by. It's the anniversary of me beginning the job as the General Secretary, and I honestly don't know where it's gone. And mainly that's due to the pandemic and the fallout from it, certainly in our industry. And I think celebrating today and its meaning is important. We've had, like you mentioned, Tony, one of the hardest 12 months any of us have ever experienced on such a scale. And we should celebrate the fantastic work that our members have done to keep the nation going, and in our situation, the nation fed. Because it hasn't been the bankers, it's not been the shareholders or the elite that have woken up day after day to go to a factory with a few hundred other people in it to produce bread, cakes, Yorkshire puddings, and everything else that has kept the supermarket shelves and our bellies full. It has been Bakers Food and Allied Workers members and food workers, many of which, as our Right to Food report has shown, have done this while struggling to feed themselves and their families, not least of which part-time workers in the fast food sector. We know from our survey that food insecurity is a significant issue for workers in the food industry, and that's why we fully support Ian Byrne, the MP's call to enshrine a right to food into legislation. And we're now looking at how we feed into that by raising the employment standards in the food industry. So we don't have 1 in 5 people running out of food or relying on friends and family to provide food for them to eat, because no one should be in that situation in the 6th richest country in the world, especially not people feeding the nation. So it is quick today. If you're watching this, you're working in the food industry, specifically the fast food industry, because we've got a lot of work to do around organising that. Get in touch with the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union. Join our campaign to get a right to food enshrined into law and raise the food industry up. And let's organise your workplace and the wider food industry, because you deserve better. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was absolutely fantastic, to the point, and lots of information. And as Sarah says, if you're working in the fast food industry and you're on this, whether watching on Facebook or one of the other platforms, join a union. That's the most important thing. Comrades, we're now going to move to a good friend, Paddy Lillis, who is the General Secretary of USDAW, the Shop Workers Union. And Paddy's well known to many of you. And Paddy's going to speak on USDAW's campaign on this very important issue of fire and rehire. Paddy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And colleagues, fire and rehire, while not a new tactic, is clearly on the rise across the UK. And despite billions in government support for businesses throughout this pandemic, the TUC reports 1 in 10 workers have been affected since the first lockdown last year. And a recent Observer investigation revealed that 2/3 of companies accused of fire and rehire were actually in profit. My union, USDAW, is currently supporting members in 2 such disputes. Just weeks after settling a long-running pay dispute, the cosmetic and pharmaceutical company BCM Veriva threatened to fire and rehire our members if they didn't agree to plans to slash their sick pay, their life assurance, their pensions, and the redundancy entitlements. And in Tesco's, our members of some of the distribution centres are facing a huge cut in wages. And colleagues, this is after the business moved to renege on a long-standing and clearly defined collective agreement with the union that was made in good faith. Hundreds of employees are impacted across both employers, many of whom have given absolutely years of service to their employer, only to be threatened with having their contracts rendered null and void. This is no way to treat loyal key workers. People, colleagues, who have gone to extraordinary efforts to support their employers, but more importantly, to support their communities throughout the pandemic. Our first response is always and has been to attempt to engage with the companies through established collective bargaining mechanisms. Unfortunately, we have been unable to resolve these disputes through discussion. In BCM Veriva, it is likely we'll be balloting our members for industrial action in the coming weeks. And in relation to Tesco, we have succeeded in getting a temporary injunction against Tesco's in the Scottish courts, and we're back there next week. And again, in the English High Court, we're there again next week, fighting this against Tesco's. Colleagues, this is an undesirable situation for everyone involved. Our members are facing uncertainty. The employers are facing disruption and significant legal costs. And there's clearly an impact on industrial relations. And sadly, it was also avoidable. By entering into consultation with workplace reps, it's likely that a more amicable solution could have been found. Many thousands of workers are facing similar threats to their terms and conditions, and all too often without the support of a trade union to challenge and push back these employers. USDA is committed to supporting all our members affected by fire and rehire, but it can't be right that this tactic can be legally used by employers to undermine terms and conditions. I believe there needs to be a change in the law to make this reprehensible practice illegal and to protect workers' rights. Colleagues, a change in the law which USDA and other unions will continue to fight for. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Paddy. Really inspiring there, and one of the key issues that we've got to fight now over the next year or so. Comrades, our next part of the rally is to introduce our good friend and comrade Maxine Peake. Many of you know Maxine, a famous actor and left-wing activist, and we've got a video clip that Maxine did on this question of fire and rehire, particularly in regard to the British gas workers in the GMB. So, James, can you roll Maxine's video?
Hi, my name is Maxine Peake, and I'm here to express my support for the GMB members taking strike action against their employer, British Gas. Now, our government recently claimed that the UK has one of the best workers' rights records in the world. So it is an outrage that a large profitable company like British Gas are allowed to implement fire and rehire to cut workers' terms and conditions. Now, in 1889, one of my heroes, Eleanor Marx, helped to form the Gas Workers Union, a forerunner to the GMB. Eleanor spent most of her life campaigning and fighting for a better life for working people. Now, over the years, trade unions have continued that fight, holding employers to account. But the battle to retain rights and resist exploitative bosses is a daily struggle. GMB members find themselves at the heart of that struggle right now, and that's why they need our full support. So I want to send my solidarity to the GMB members, and I'm wishing you all the luck with your struggle. Thank you.
Really inspiring there from Maxine. Comrades, our next speaker is our good friend Andy MacDonald, who is Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Employment Rights. And as you know, one of Andy's main tasks now is the Employment Rights Task Force that Labour have set up, which is looking at the whole question of trade union and labour rights. Andy's a great friend to the trade union movement, and I know many of you have worked with him in the past. So Andy, it's over to you.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks for this invite to speak at this May Day rally. It's a great privilege to do so and be among such fabulous contributors. And we do come together today to celebrate the victories that the movement secured for workers, thanks to the struggles of the past, and to look forward to how we can together win the struggles we face today in order to bring about that fundamental change in workers' rights. To that end, Tony, I would like to speak about the work that I'm doing in my role as the Shadow Secretary of State for Employment Rights and Protections, alongside Labour's affiliated trade unions and with invaluable input from many stakeholders, of course, including the Institute for Employment Rights. Earlier this year, we established that task force on power in the workplace. in order to develop on the Labour Party's strong agenda on workplace rights that was spelled out in the 2019 manifesto, and to set out a shared vision for a new deal for working people by setting out a path for how workers can be collectively and individually empowered. The social contract's been broken, and it shouldn't have to be said, but every worker is entitled to fair pay, job security, dignity and safety at work, especially as we recover and rebuild from the coronavirus crisis. Yet sadly, the pandemic has brought into sharp relief the imbalances of power in the workplace, which the labour and trade union movement have long sought to rectify. And the crisis has demonstrated how a lack of individual and collective rights and the weakness of health and safety protections has contributed to unsafe working practices and economic insecurity that has left the UK with one of the worst death tolls in the world. It's one of the highest and one of the worst economic crises of any major economy. Yet while the weakness of employment rights and imbalances of power in the workplace have certainly been exacerbated in the past year, insecurity, low pay, and a lack of dignity are problems that existed long before we were hit by coronavirus. Now, more than ever, it's essential that these issues are addressed to improve living standards and provide economic security for all of the UK's 28 million workers. Fair and decent conditions of work are not only just directly good for working people, they also have wider benefits of improving productivity, economic opportunity, and health and well-being. To ensure everyone is entitled to fair pay, job security, and dignity at work, and in order to address inequality, it is key that all workers have a comprehensive set of rights and protections, and trade unions are strengthened to ensure that they have the rights they need to represent their members, to organise, to bargain, and to win for working people. An economy where security and opportunity are available to all can only be achieved when good workplace relations are established and underpinned with strong laws and mechanisms that enrich the lives of workers and reward them fairly. And that's why the task force that I'm chairing has been exploring a number of key issues, such as the impact of outsourcing, the problems arising from bogus self-employment, and also the scourge of discrimination and workplace inequality. And in the coming months, we'll also be further developing our position on collective rights and collective bargaining, tackling the restrictions on trade union activity, and further advocating and entrenching our vehement opposition to the pernicious practice of fire and rehire, persisting with our call for these despicable practices to be banned, as well as addressing the prevalence of in-work poverty, low pay, and financial insecurity. So I look forward to sharing with you all the work that the task force has been conducting when we publish our report later in the year, ahead of the Labour Party conference. So please watch this space. But for that new deal, for working people, that's only going to be possible if, as Michael Marmot said, we are clear about what's gone wrong and we are bold about how to fix it. Solidarity, comrades.
Thank you very much, Andy. Fantastic work that you're doing. And I know all of us want to continue to work with you to make sure that the work you're undertaking becomes a reality and we get some decent employment rights. Comrades, I'm going to hand over in a second to my colleague, Caroline Jones from the Institute of Employment Rights. But before I do, let's thank the London May Day Organising Committee for their support, all of the various platforms who are streaming this on their Facebook and Twitter sites, and as has been said, to the Morning Star, which carries the manifesto, the May Day manifesto, on as a wraparound. Get your copy today. It's a really, really important edition of the paper. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks very much for that, Tony, and thanks for chairing that first session of excellent speakers. My name is Carolyn Jones. I'm Director of the Institute of Employment Rights, and I'm proud to chair this second session with another fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm also encouraged by the wide range of organisations coming together today in a true reflection of collective organisation to bring May Day solidarity to workers across the world. Because it's that spirit of collectivism and unity that will win the changes that workers demand and deserve. Our strength, as we all know, lies in our numbers. We are the many. And I have many to introduce in my short session, so let me start by introducing Matt Wright. Matt, as you will know, is the General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union. He's a long-time campaigner for workers' rights, a socialist through and through. Despite the dedicated work of firefighters from Grenfell through to COVID, firefighters now find their union and their bargaining rights under threat. So, Matt, over to you.
Thanks very much, Carolyn, and greetings, comrades. And I think for the Fire Brigades Union, greetings to workers all over the world on International Workers' Day, May Day. And as well as looking at our current struggles, it is, I think, important on this day to put those into international and historical context. I think it's an opportunity for us to reflect on those. That Workers' Day, May Day, has its roots in international struggles for the shorter working week. And we need to reflect today on how that internationalism applies today, because I think the pandemic has exposed the realities of inequality and injustice that this system brings to us. It has been workers in the UK, but also across the world, who have firstly borne the brunt of the pandemic in terms of suffering, illness and death on an unprecedented scale. But it has also been demonstrated very clearly that it is workers who have seen society through. Workers in the public and the private sector, whether that's in health or in food production or transport or whatever. Without working people, society would have indeed fallen apart. And on the other side, we see that the other side of that story is there are some people who have done very, very well out of the past 18 months. There are billionaires whose wealth has increased phenomenally, exposing the realities of this system. And yet on the back of the contribution that workers have made, including workers in my own sector, we have a government that intends to impose further austerity. Despite their words, that's what it means, further austerity on working people. We have already seen more than a decade of pay restraint, in reality pay cuts imposed on public sector workers. And the Chancellor announced last November that indeed he now intends to pursue that further with what he now calls a pay pause, indeed a further pay cut for public sector workers with a partial exception, but not really, for National Health Service workers. Additionally, as Carolyn has said, shockingly for my own sector, where firefighters have not just delivered a first-class public service throughout the pandemic, but have also taken on a whole range of additional tasks to help our colleagues in other public services to deal with COVID, including, and this brings it home most sharply perhaps, special teams moving the bodies of the deceased. On the back of that, we have a government that is just about to launch a new attack on us, including our collective bargaining rights. It is an utter insult to us as firefighters. It's an insult to everyone working in the public sector. And I'll finish on this. We have a huge tradition in Britain and internationally in the workers' movement. And it's those traditions that will see us through this, those traditions of struggle, solidarity, internationalism and socialism. Thanks very much, Carolyn.
Thanks very much, Matt. We wish the FBU well in its battle ahead. And of course, I will be working with the FBU in their determination to protect their collective bargaining rights and resist the imposition of pay review body. Thanks very much for that, Matt. So from threats to victories, we have it all on this platform. I am very proud to introduce a wonderful sister, comrade and true fighter for justice, Eileen Turnbull. I'm also proud to have received my commemorative card and to record the victory that they have achieved. And here to update us on that victory is the woman who never gave up on the battle. So great to have you here from the Shrewsbury 24 campaign. Eileen Turnbull, over to you.
Thank you very much, Card. Thank you. And also thank you to the Institute of Employment Rights and the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom for inviting me to say a few words today. It is a privilege and a great pleasure to speak to fellow trade unionists on May Day, the day of the year when we get together to celebrate the proud traditions of trade unionists from all over the world. For all of us in the Shrewsbury 24 campaign and the 24 pickets who were put on trial in Shrewsbury Crown Court in 1973 and 74, it's an extra special day. This is the first May Day in 47 long years when we can celebrate that at last we've achieved justice for the pickets. The Court of Appeal judgment on the 23rd of March 2021 overturned all of the convictions of the pickets in the 3 trials at Shrewsbury. This is an unprecedented victory for the trade union and labour movement. The trials have been an attempt by the employers, the government, and the state to weaken trade unionism. But we have now been able to overturn this horrendous miscarriage of justice. It's been a long, hard road for us all. It's impossible to express in words how we feel, but we're all overjoyed. I'm not going to repeat the background to the case. The full details are on our website. What I do want to emphasise, though, on this day is the importance of solidarity. On behalf of the pickets and the campaign, I wish to thank all the trade unionists up and down the country who have supported us through thick and thin over all these years. Your support and solidarity gave us the encouragement to go on, even when the going got really tough. You inspired us never to give up, and we could never have done it without you. Everyone in our movement should share the joy of this tremendous victory because you were all part of it. My particular thoughts and admiration on this day go to the 8 pickets, the 8 North Wales pickets, who against all odds never gave up and won an incredible battle to achieve justice for themselves and all their fellow pickets. Finally, I would appeal to you all to continue to support all the justice campaigns, as they are very brave people who, like us, are trying to right a wrong and achieve justice for working people. The All Grieve Truth and Justice campaign, the Justice for Grenfell campaign, the Blacklist Support Group, Spy Cops, the Right to Food campaign, and all of the others. They're not giving up, and with our support, they'll succeed. United we stand, and solidarity to all fellow trade unionists around the country. And thank you again for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. It's always a pleasure to have you. Brilliant. And thanks for bringing us that inspiring news. It's an uplift, it really is. Our next speaker is here to outline what we think is an excellent initiative, one that helps coordinate and support the actions being taken by workers up and down the country. It highlights the solidarity and it brings that solidarity to those in struggle. So welcome, Henry, to tell us all about Strike Map.
Thanks, Carolyn, and thank you to all those that organised this important rally. It's a privilege to join such great speakers from across the movement. My name is Henry Fowler and I'm a co-founder of Strike Map UK with my good friend and comrade, Robert Paul. I want to start by sending solidarity to all workers this May Day from Strike Map UK. We really do have a world to win. What is Strike Map, I hear you say? Strike Map is a worker digital powered map that allows people to plot the action they're taking, allows us to find it easier to send solidarity, and also hopes to inspire others in struggle. What a 2021 it has been. We've mapped over 50 strikes and we've probably missed a few along the way. From cleaners winning the living wage to Barnoldswick securing the future of a region and an industry, with Hunts Point in New York in between. We are seeing workers across the globe taking action and winning. There has also been some heroic and important campaigns of action. And I want to say a special solidarity message to all those in GMB that fought at British Gas. The growing use of fire and rehire, as we've already heard from other speakers, is a disgrace. And it's time for us all now to get behind Unite's campaign and develop a joint union campaign with the full weight of our movement, from the workplace to our community and to Westminster. This May Day is a time to reflect on how working people kept this country going during a pandemic and how we must now continue to use that strength and power to fight collectively to take action with the movement behind us to keep winning and redefining power across our communities. If you know about a strike, please put it on our map. Solidarity to all involved in struggle and taking action. Happy May Day, everyone. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Henry. Brilliant. Now for some solidarity wishes from Australia. We're not the only ones struggling with anti-union activity. There's much going on around the world, as has already been said, and I believe we have a video to share.
Greetings from Australia this May Day 2021. Back in 2019, just 2 years ago, Scott Morrison, Prime Minister here of the Liberal National Coalition government, right-wing government, introduced a vicious anti-union piece of legislation called Ensuring Integrity, of all things. Thankfully, it was defeated in 2019 on the narrowest of margins, but undeterred, they reintroduced it at the end of 2019, and it was only stopped because the COVID crisis during 2020 forced the government to step up to the plate on a national consensus, and they withdrew it. But their true colours came through, and at the end of 2020 they introduced yet another act, this time called the Industrial Relations Omnibus Bill, no longer attacking trade unions directly, this time following a different tack, attacking part-time work, making it easier to casualise, undermining the right to make agreements and for unions to have their greenfield site agreements. And they promised to make it harder to get away with underpayment of wages and to stop wage theft. But due to a huge campaign led by the ACTU, they had to virtually abandon the bill. The only thing they got through was the casualisation clause, which was definitely a defeat and a setback, but not as bad as it would otherwise have been. And in a vindictive measure, they withdrew the rights workers would have had to stop wage theft and underpayments. It just goes to show that around the world, unless we stand together united in our trade unions, offering an independent voice for workers, we will suffer defeats and setbacks in our standards. It doesn't have to be that way. Solidarity is the key. And from Australia, I'm proud to bring solidarity and greetings to you this May Day.
Brilliant. Thanks for that softly spoken gentleman there, but a strong message from Barry Camfield. So solidarity to workers in Australia. Moving on to our next speaker, we have another strong message and one as well that touches on wage theft. This time our speaker is Kate Ewing. Kate is currently in Barcelona doing a PhD on work time and minimum wage. But she used to be a legal officer in Unison, where she was involved in minimum wage litigation in support of workers in the care sector. So Kate, share some of your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Cad. Hi, everybody. I'm really pleased to be able to join you all today for May Day. And I wanted to start by expressing solidarity with all the care workers who were working last night and who will be working tonight and all the other nights throughout the pandemic, before it and no doubt after it when that eventually comes. Workers who are doing such important and vital work and yet who were told in the recent Supreme Court ruling in the MENCAP sleep-in case that they're not entitled to at least the minimum wage for all of their time at work. We see much talk in the face of the pandemic of our values as a society, of rebuilding after this huge global crisis. And so the Supreme Court decision gives us a critical moment for reflection as part of that rebuilding process. What are our values as a society? What do we value? Who do we value? And how do we value their work? When we consider fundamental issues of workers' rights, dignity, and fairness, I think we need to go back to some basic principles. And to do this, we need to go back to another crisis, also on a global scale, the Second World War, and revisit the proposals for post-war rebuilding. The ILO's Declaration of Philadelphia in 1944 set out a post-war recovery vision for workers, founded on the basic and key concept that labour is not a commodity and that poverty anywhere constitutes a danger to prosperity everywhere. That is to say, sub-minimum wages, poverty pay, must concern everyone. The Declaration of Philadelphia is based on principles of social justice, requiring policies relating to wages, earnings, hours, and conditions of work calculated to ensure a just share of the fruits of progress and a minimum living wage to all employed and in need of such protection. So the changes to the law needed following the Supreme Court decision and any post-pandemic recovery plan should embrace and be based upon these foundational international labour rights principles. And as the Declaration of Philadelphia also reminds us, workers' rights are best secured through collective means. So the challenge for governments, political parties, and employers is this: if workers and their work are valued, particularly those who've given so much in the face of the pandemic, like care workers, then there must be a plan put in place which demonstrates this now and for the future. Workers now more than ever must be given an equal say and bargaining power in order to secure their just share. Thanks very much and happy May Day.
Brilliant, and happy May Day to you too, Kate. Much to fight for ahead, as you say, and we will be lobbying for changes to the law when the long-awaited employment bill is eventually tabled. And I'll move on to the final speaker in this section and he is the person who will be at the forefront of supporting Andy MacDonald in the Houses of Parliament. He'll be drafting amendments to the legislation and leading the arguments for the repeal of anti-union legislation and its replacement for progressive rights at work. That is our next speaker. He is John Hendy. He is chair of the Institute of Employment Rights. He is vice president of the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom, and he is one of the drafters of the call for a new deal for workers, which is wrapped around the Morning Star today. So, John, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Cad, and all our wonderful speakers this morning. As you just mentioned, before COVID hit us, a team of experts commissioned by the Institute of Employment Rights set out a transformative programme for future work relations in the UK. After COVID, we need it more than ever. We can be sure that we won't get it in the government's elusive employment bill, whenever that may surface. But it's important that we have a coherent and universal plan to restore the balance of power at the workplace. Let's begin by reminding ourselves of the appalling state of workplace relations, the product of our current labour laws. Average wages hadn't increased in real terms for 12 years before the pandemic. They fell further by 0.9% between April 2019 and April 2020. This is likely to fall further since nearly 1 in 10 workers, 9%, have had to accept reductions in pay and conditions by use of fire and rehire over the last year. Over 5.1 million people earn less than the real living wage. 8.3 million people live in households in poverty, working households in poverty. 3.6 million people are in insecure work. 1 million workers are on 0 hours contracts.
Tens of thousands of workers have contracted COVID at work and thousands have died from it. Employers have failed to take the precautions required by law, and the HSE have failed to enforce that law. 1 million people have lost their jobs because of COVID, and a further million are likely to do so. And above everything, 75% of UK workers are on terms and conditions determined unilaterally by employers. They're excluded from all the key decisions which affect them: furlough, redundancies, pay cuts, changes to conditions, and at national economic policy level too. The need for a transformation of our working lives is obvious. The first requirement is, of course, more jobs, jobs that are sustainable and create a green economy, world a better place to live. But beyond that, we need a new deal at work, as Andy has spoken about, to cure the blatant injustices of working life. We need to tackle inequality. The UK has the second highest level of inequality in the developed world after the USA. Inequality in income and wealth degrades every aspect of life, damaging for everyone, even the rich. Inequality leads to instability, stress, crime, dissatisfaction, and disorder. Financial inequality affects physical and mental health and life expectancy on a sliding scale. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to suffer bad health and die younger. Financial inequality goes hand in hand with the inequality of power, which is inherent in the relationship between the worker and the employer. Short of a socialist revolution, there's only one way of achieving this: the restoration of collective bargaining. In particular, we need restoration of sectoral collective bargaining, minimum terms and conditions fixed by negotiation in each industry and sector of the economy. On this foundation, workplace bargaining can be reinvigorated. Even the OECD now recognizes that extensive collective bargaining is the only realistic means of diminishing inequality. And our level of collective bargaining has collapsed. Between 1940 and 1980, over 80% of our workers had terms and conditions negotiated by trade unions. It's down to 25% today. So that's why 75% of our workers are at the take it or leave it mercy of employers to set their wages, their hours, and their conditions of work. Collective bargaining raises wages, increased wages which people spend, creating demand in the economy, stimulating the production of more goods and services and more jobs. Increased wages means a higher tax take for government, lower expenditure on the state benefits which subsidize low wages. More then can be spent on public services and investing in infrastructure. Collective bargaining increases productivity, and the UK has the lowest productivity in Western Europe. But above all, collective bargaining gives workers a say in the condition of their working lives. It is industrial democracy. Finally, international treaties ratified by the UK oblige the government to promote collective bargaining. My comrade, Professor Keith Ewing, will speak about that. This all requires legislation, and the Institute of Employment Rights has mapped that out. It also requires greater legal rights for trade unions, access to workplaces, and the right to strike in accordance with international law. Beyond that, the Institute has identified many other legal rights which require revision, including the I've kept you long enough. Solidarity, and thanks for listening.
Thanks very much for that, John. Brilliant as ever. Your words reflect the title behind this meeting: Resist Attacks from Employment and Government, Repeal Anti-Trade Union Laws and Replace with a framework that supports workers, and not through more individual rights, but by strengthening the voice of workers in the workplace at the sectoral level and at a national level. So thanks very much for that, John. Well, at this point, I'm going to pass over to our new chair, but before I do, I would like to say thank you to some of the organisation who've supported this event today. Thanks to Strike Map, thanks to the Centre for Labour and Social Studies class, thanks to Arise, Tribune and the People's Assembly. I'll be saying more about that later, but for now I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Adrian Weir. Over to you, Adrian.
Thanks very much, Cad, and good morning, everybody. I'm Adrian Weir. I'm Assistant Chief of Staff at Unite, but in the context of this morning, I'm also the Assistant Secretary of the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom. And can I offer and send my warmest May Day greetings to everyone on the call, and solidarity to all workers at home and abroad today on Workers' Day around the world. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome our first speaker in this session, Dave Ward, who's the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. And Dave is going to be speaking this morning about collectivism and trade union values. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Adrian. Morning, everybody. Am I unmuted? Yes. Happy May Day to everybody. And as we remember the historic struggles of the labour movement and working class people and all of their achievements, I firmly believe that we are on the brink of seeing the power of collectivism come back into our lives. There are some great wins. The CW certainly had wins this year in terms of deals with Royal Mail on pay, job security in a private company and reduced working hours. But I'm seeing that in what other speakers have spoken about. I'm seeing people up for the fight. I think collectivism is there. All we need is to ignite it with an overarching campaign and fight. And that is to get behind a new deal for working people. The pandemic has exposed an imbalance of power and wealth in the world of work, in the wider economy and in society. And we live in a world now that's more unequal than at any point in our lifetimes. And the key question that we face is, what are we going to do about it? I don't believe that the current Labour leadership are going to be able to do that. I think it falls upon the trade union movement to do that. I'm not talking about disaffiliation with the Labour Party. I'm not talking about starting a new political party. I'm talking about trade unions leading the way in the fight for a new deal by harnessing all of the collectivism that we're seeing in society at the moment. Three things we need to do. One is focus on the levelling up agenda that Johnson is lying to people about in this country. We can turn that levelling up agenda into our agenda to seriously move working people forward by just being truthful and saying that you can't level up unless you're also prepared to level out power and wealth. We all know Johnson's not going to do that. He's vulnerable to that point. We need to lead that fight. All of the issues that have been raised today can be part of that fight. All of the campaigns that individual unions need to take part in and are doing at the moment can be part of that fight. The second thing we need to do is to make sure that we can lead the fight on equality of opportunity for everybody. We need to lead that fight as trade unionists. We need to do it in a way that also links it to class struggle. And I believe that fighting against racism, fighting for gender equality is our fight. But we do it in a way that unites all working people. Finally, the challenge for us on May Day is for unions to sit down now in the same room and work out how we're going to mobilise working people behind the campaign for a new deal. We can do it. The time is now. Let's get behind that fight. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Dave. And just on a point that perhaps you didn't mention, it's of course so important that we don't wait for a Labour government. And it's so great that the CWU is now seeking to make a reality of sectoral-wide collective bargaining to raise the wages and conditions for all workers in the post and parcel sector. Solidarity. Our next speaker is Andy Green, who, as well as being Secretary of the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom and a member of the Unite Executive Council, is also the union convener at Tilbury Docks, one of the ports that has applied to be a free port. So Andy is going to speak about this new development, the free ports. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Adrian, and May Day greetings and solidarity to all comrades. Yeah, free ports. So the new free ports that have been announced in the budget have been billed as a way to turbocharge trade and the answer to our post-Brexit woes, and supposedly a much-needed boost to the economy. But already the Chancellor's expressed concern that these free ports and their tax status are going to have a negative effect upon the Treasury, and so the Chancellor's had to limit them in number. It's only going to be 10 because he wants to control the impact. So what then is the point of free ports if it isn't going to be for their economic boost? Well, the benefits of free ports are now being billed as a way to level up the country and to address regional inequality, bringing in investment, trade and jobs into these deprived communities. But you've only got to look at port development in the last 20 years to see that the same identical promises have been made: more investment, more jobs. But the fact of the matter is that it simply just moves cargo from one part of the country to another. Few jobs are ever created, and it's never ever been a benefit for local communities. Because if you look at where the local communities are and the free port zones, your experience has shown us that free ports and their tax incentives and the tariff reductions don't provide high-skilled jobs, they don't create jobs, and they're never bringing any wealth into those local communities. Businesses will take advantage, they relocate for their tax purposes, and employees are normally forced to either move with their jobs or face redundancy, or as you've heard already, it's fire and rehire. So in addition to that, they get the benefits of lower employment standards and weaker health and safety. So the government's response to that has been, to issue guidance to say that shouldn't occur. But what comfort does guidance ever provide us? It never helps us at all. So if we actually look at the bids themselves, what companies have submitted, all of these bids are secret. You're not allowed to know what these bids are or how they're even going to operate. The governance of free ports is going to be in the hands of the employers as well. And these governance bodies will also hide behind closed doors with no oversight, allowing businesses to remain in the shadows. The enormous free port boundaries that have also been thrown up, which encompass thousands and thousands of businesses, will also create problems for workers, and opportunities to use and abuse the free port system will emerge, and that same cloak of secrecy will veil these businesses. So you can understand the huge, huge dangers that we've got for working people and their communities. We are going to be facing low pay, fewer rights and poorer health and safety. So we as trade unions have got a duty and a really hard job in front of us to organise, to prepare to meet the threats of free ports, defend our members, push for trade union recognition and collective bargaining. Happy May Day, and thanks for inviting me.
Thanks very much, Andy. Very good. And of course, the free ports of today are just a new version of the export processing zones of the past that, of course, were vigorously opposed by sections of the left, the majority of the left, I would say, in days gone by. So solidarity to you down at Tilbury and people in dock communities all over the country. Next up, we have Yvette Williams. Among other things, Yvette is a member of the TUC Anti-Racism Task Group, the collective bargaining work stream, and has also contributed to Labour's Doreen Lawrence review of COVID and BAME workers. So Yvette, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. And greetings to workers all over the world today. Thank you, IER, for inviting me to speak today. As John referred to earlier, when we entered the COVID-19 pandemic, we already had weak and poor employment protections. That was bad enough. But on the pandemic, it suddenly got worse. We know now that many working people have been damaged, many disproportionately. Black, Asian and minority ethnic workers, made up of mainly women, key workers, those who are low paid and those in precarious employment, many paying with their lives. Many were also reliant on in-work benefits, a burden that the taxpayer has to bear, rather than obscene profit-making companies paying them a real living wage. And it also exposed further the ethnicity and gender pay gaps. Many of them were working in essential services that we rely on. They were forced to work without protective gear, had no access to paid sick leave, and when they spoke up about health and safety concerns, unless they had strong union support, they risked being fired. There's a blatant disregard for health and safety. And I know this is not a one-off, because I live where Grenfell Tower is, and it stands as a monument to neoliberalism, where the corporates knew that there was an accident waiting to happen. And we know now what a disaster it was. Since Thatcher, successive governments have left us with badly broken collective bargaining. Before Thatcher, over 70% of workers were covered by collective bargaining. Today, it's less than 26%. So it's a careful historic erosion of unions and worker power. Collective bargaining must be reinforced in the cause of equality, in the cause of diversity, the economy, and our democracy. And as workers, we cannot afford to wait. The one area of growth we saw during the pandemic was the number of food banks that came up. And even when the government tried to assist, after a footballer, now my favourite footballer, begged to feed our children ended up with a bag of stale crisps, a rotten apple, and a mouldy sandwich, while the very suppliers of those lunches, and who gave them the contract, we don't know, did David Cameron lobby on their behalf, just kind of made a packet load of money. The horrors of the pandemic, nonetheless, does create an opportunity for us, but also an opportunity for them. And so we must continue to insist and ensure that change prioritizes the quality of our lives, all our lives, and it should be the main function and purpose of our society. I'm going to finish with this. Race, class, capitalism, exploitation are all intrinsically linked. They cannot be looked at in silos. If one group benefits, all will benefit. We must stand together to demand better and dismantle this machine of exploitation. They're forcing us to be voiceless. They're even attempting to criminalise us for speaking up. We need all voices, all of our voices. For me as a Black worker, I'm part of a Black-led liberation movement, but there should be one collective, united voice on all issues and in all sectors. We need to fight together, but most importantly, we need to fight to win, all for one and one for all. Solidarity.
Great, great. Thanks so much, Yvette. And of course, it is absolutely clear that those who contribute the most are often rewarded the least. And it's often BAME workers who do contribute the most and are surely rewarded the least. So this campaigning work is really a responsibility of all of us to pick up and run with. Our next speaker is Mick Ricks, an organiser with the GMB, and his 3 minutes he's going to be speaking about organising in the gig economy and particularly taming the abuses of Uber. Mick, over to you.
Well, thank you, Adrian, and to Tony, Cad, and yourselves and the organisations behind this event. Thank you for hosting it, and a happy International May Day to all brothers and sisters within our global movement. I'm delighted to share our experiences with you in organising in the gig and the Amazon economy. Some know it is as the precariat, which is basically a modern word for casualisation. Yes, we have been here before, comrades. There are some in the gig who are able to do well for themselves. However, they are a minority. We are talking about those working in the UK of around 7.5 million workers who have used some form of app technology at least once per week in sourcing and obtaining work. We have seen the explosion of the Uberization of the world of work, in which tens of thousands of jobs working for a single employer have been converted from employed to bogus self-employment, non-unionized, casualized jobs. The moonshine liquor poured from the mouths of the expensive paid PR and policy consultants employed by these companies justify their exploitation of workers by saying it is the workers' fault. The workers want the flexibility, whilst these companies seek to exert further controls over these same workers. Yes, they were the very reasons why GMB Union started organising these campaigns against the Uberization of the world of work in the UK. Many say there is a race to the bottom. Well, let's tell you, the bottom is here. It's already happened. Our actions were intended to secure workplace justice, but that was only part of the story. Those are the headlines. The hard work is on the ground, organising in our communities, winning the trust of workers. Our activists who helped put all this together, they didn't do it for the headlines. They did it because it was why our union was founded in the first place. Yes, we took Amazon courier companies to court and won substantial damages for our members. Yes, we've just won another ruling against Addison Lee in the Court of Appeal last week. And yes, we won against Hermes 2 years ago. Yes, we won in the courts 4 times against Uber. But our strategy has been to use these actions not as the final solution in our fight against casualisation, but as this part of the strategy to assist in winning recognition and collective bargaining agreements with the rights to access and organise workers. We did this with Hermes 2 years ago. We were the first to win a collective bargaining agreement covering these workforces. And we won not only workers' rights in the courts, but we also won by using the power of the union through negotiation, winning voluntary workers' rights and benefits for the rest of the workforce. Yes, we are now in negotiations with other gig economy companies too. There are those who argue that crowdfunding, not paying subscriptions fee, i.e. free membership and just getting legal decisions issued by the courts are the way forward. That is not GMB's view. Our trade union was founded 132 years ago by Eleanor Marx and Will Thorne. Workers had no rights then. They had no legal protections then. They were the precariat of the time. They stood their ground. They took strike action and they negotiated an agreement with the employer. Free membership, crowdfunding don't win agreements for members. They don't build strong union memberships or sustainable collective bargaining structures. Union organisation does, collectivism does, and power does. It was just over 6 years ago this month that we started the journey to defend those that were being exploited, working on services for Uber. The company with the shiny technology, they knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. The disruptor of disruptors, probably the most famous globally in the gig economy of companies. GMB proudly disrupted that disruptor. As a result, 70,000 Uber workers today will now be awarded holiday pay, a minimum floor of the national living wage, pensions and other benefits that were denied them. This is a tremendous victory for all workers in the UK. It signals the death of the exploitative gig economy. Our focus and attention is now trained on fighting for a recognition and collective bargaining agreement with Uber. That goes hand in hand with our focus on trade union collective bargaining power, especially at sectoral level, which must go hand in hand with the rights to have access to organise here in the UK. The pandemic has shown all the unfairness around workers. Heroes 1 minute, being exploited the next minute. We must demand better. We demand that we build back better. Our union movement must have a coherent collective voice with unified messages to ensure that we do build back better in the post-COVID world of work. We want to see a more resilient and fair society, with collective bargaining being so much more than an industrialized weapon. Collective bargaining democratizes the workplace. It helps give workers a voice. Resist, repeal, replace. Thank you, comrades, and a happy International May Day to you all.
Great, thanks very much, Mick. And of course, you're so right that organising the casualised sector today is not so very different from organising casualised dock workers and others in the East End of London over 100 years ago. We did it then, and so we better make sure that we do it again today. Comrades, we've had contributions from Australia and Catalonia, and next up we have a video clip from Philadelphia. It's John Shin, who's the Secretary Treasurer of the US Union, the United Steelworkers, and John's going to speak about some of the positive changes that you may be surprised to learn that Joe Biden is introducing in favour of unions in the United States.
Greetings and solidarity from the USW, and greetings to Unite and the workers in the UK on this May Day. In the US, we are mobilizing to support the PRO Act, which would do a few things. It would empower workers to organize and bargain. While the economy is working very well for the wealthy and the corporations, it's stagnating for everyone else. From 1980 to 2014, wages for the bottom half of income earners grew by 1%, while wages for the top 1% of earners grew by 205%. This inequality, stagnation, and instability for so many is not a natural product of a functioning economy. It is a result of policy choices that have stripped workers of the power to stand together and bargain for fairer wages, benefits, and working conditions. The Protecting the Right to Organize Act is a historic proposal that restores fairness to the economy by strengthening the federal laws that protect workers' rights to organize a union, bargain for negotiated higher wages, and better benefits. Today, union members earn 13% more than non-union workers. However, toothless labor laws have been exploited by unscrupulous employers, which has slashed union membership from 33% in 1956 to 10% in 2018. The National Labor Relations Act does not empower workers to enforce their labor rights in courts or permit the board to assess monetary penalties that could deter and punish unlawful conduct, such as firing workers for seeking a union. It also authorizes meaningful penalties for employers that violate workers' rights under the PRO Act, strengthens support for workers who suffer retaliation for exercising their rights, also closes loopholes in the federal labor laws. The bill prevents employers from misclassifying their employees as supervisors or independent contractors, and prevents workers from being denied remedies due to their immigration status. It also holds corporations accountable for union busting. Union busting law firms in the U.S. is a multi-billion-dollar business. These firms advertise and sell their services as union avoidance specialists. The PRO Act increases transparency in the labor management relations. The bill requires employers to post notices that inform workers of their rights under the National Labor Relations Act, and to disclose contracts with consultants hired to persuade employees on how to exercise their rights. The bill also repeals right-to-work laws, which were created during the Jim Crow era to keep white and black workers from organizing together. Right now, 27 out of our 50 states have right-to-work laws, which mandates unions have to represent workers who choose not to pay dues. President Biden supports the PRO Act. and we are hopeful we can overcome resistance in the Senate and win this great victory for workers. We are also mobilizing to support President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure bill, which will help secure our members' jobs in the future. President Biden is the first president in my lifetime that understands the importance of unions and proudly talks about how important good union jobs are in many of his speeches. He has also appointed a cabinet that understands that unions need a seat at the table when developing legislation and policies. We need to seize the moment to get the true labor law reform we deserve in the United States. Comrades, have a great May Day event, and thank you for all you do for our members and the workers throughout the world.
Well, what a turn-up. Joe Biden may, of course, leave a lot to be desired, especially on foreign policy, but on this issue, he's clearly setting the pace that many Europeans could follow for some benefit for our people as well. Our final speaker in this session is Keith Ewing, president of both the Institute of Employment Rights and the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom. Keith has been working on positive labour rights for over 30 years and was one of the main architects of the labour rights initiatives adopted by Labour for inclusion in the 2017 and 2019 manifestos. Keith, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Adrian, and thanks to everyone who's stayed on in this session. And May Day greetings from me. Just listening to our American brother just made me realize how much different life could be if only we had had a Corbyn-led government after the last election. But we've got the struggle has to go on, and I think thinking about May Day today, we can think back to the very first May Day celebration in this country, which I believe was in 1890. And I think some of the concerns which preoccupied workers over 130 years ago are the same concerns that preoccupy workers today after the or during the course of the pandemic and after the last recession. So we've got problems identified today of low labor standards, including low pay and fire and rehire, about which we've heard a great deal. We've got problems of very tightly restricted trade union freedoms and a body of trade union law, which frankly would be very familiar to trade unionists as they assembled in 1890 on May Day. And thirdly, as a result of both of these features, we've got today, as we had then, very high levels of inequality. And as we heard from Sarah, so deep is that inequality in this country that we're now talking about a right to food, something which I'd never thought I would ever hear us having to campaign for in this country in my lifetime. So one of the responses to these problems, which was adopted by early trade union pioneers, was the not just seeking to improve things domestically in domestic law, but also by moving internationally, by trying to, through international solidarity, build international labor laws for the protection of workers everywhere. And that led in turn to the creation of the International Labour Organization, which I think is one of the great achievements of modern times, the ILO created in 1919. And I'd just like to read to you a short sentence which emphasizes its continuing relevance. And the sentence I'm going to read is as follows. It says, each party commits to respecting, promoting, and effectively implementing the internationally recognized core standards. And these include freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. So just to recap, just just to take this in, a duty to a commitment to respect, promote, and effectively implement international standards relating to freedom of association, including the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. Well, the question then is, well, where is this? Where did I find this sentence? I didn't find it in the ILO Constitution. It's not, although it is there. I didn't find it. I'm not reading from the Declaration of Philadelphia, though, as Kate says, it is there too. I'm reading from the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which this country has signed with the European Union as part of the Brexit deal. And the point here, which I think seems to have been largely lost, even within the movement, is that we have recommitted ourselves, the Johnson government has recommitted this country to a legal obligation which commits us to protect, to promote, to respect the right to organise, the right to bargain collectively, and the right to strike. So we should have in place a legal framework as a matter of obligation under the Free Trade Agreement, which respects these fundamental international labour standards. So that means that we should have decent legislation promoting collective bargaining, so that, as John says, it's not just 1 in 4 workers whose terms and conditions are governed by a collective agreement, but that everybody has the right to a collective agreement, that there is blanket coverage of collective bargaining through our different sectors, that we remove the restrictions on the right to strike so that we don't have notice requirements which are in breach of international law, tightly drafted balloting rules which make industrial action almost impossible, restrictions on solidarity action which are a breach of our international obligations under ILO jurisprudence. All of this should go if our commitments that we have made in the Free Trade Agreement are to be fully met. So I would just like to conclude by saying that as we stand here or sit here on May Day, and I think as we remember fallen heroes, as we celebrate great achievements of the past, we must also look forward. And looking forward, I think we have an obligation collectively to ensure that these obligations which were recommitted in 2020 are carried out. This will not happen from this government acting alone. It will happen only because there is constant pressure and agitation to remind the government of its commitments and to ensure that these commitments are complied with. And that means in turn, I think, for some politicians, that we've got to end the big huff about Brexit. Brexit has happened. And this is one of the legacies of the Brexit deal. It is not being disloyal to people who voted for Brexit or who voted against Brexit to insist that the terms of the Brexit agreement are complied with. We should insist that these labour standards are fully met by this government, and we should empower those who are in a position to ensure that these obligations are fully met. So we have some leverage in that agreement, and we must, I think, ensure that we do whatever we can and whatever is possible to insist that that leverage is used and to ensure that these commitments are met. These standards continue to be important. They are real, they have real outcomes, and they have real effects on the lives of working people. So for me, I hope you enjoy the rest of May Day, and I think we should celebrate it with a spirit of optimism and hope. We should keep the flag flying, and we should ensure that that campaign that we must commit ourselves to, campaign to ensure that international labour standards apply fully in this country. We must commit ourselves to that campaign until such time as that campaign has been fully realised. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Keith. I'm looking forward to a possible positive future for workers and their unions. But as you say, it needs to be won. And yet again, I shall hold up the Morning Star for people to see. The wraparound in today's Morning Star, written by yourself and John Hendy, signposts the direction in which we should be moving. So thanks very much again, Keith. Comrades, this session of the rally is drawing to a close. I'd like to thank the Trade Union Coordinating Group, Unite West Midlands, and the Northwest TUC for their political and practical support in putting on this rally today. I'd like to thank the speakers in this session, and I'd like to thank all of you who've tuned in either directly on the Zoom call or on various social media platforms that our partners have been streaming this event on. Thank you so much. The contributions in the chat box show that workers in Britain are up for this change that we've been talking about. It's plain for all to see that the world of work is so loaded in favour of the employer, and we need to mobilise against that bias in the world of work. So please continue to support the Institute for Employment Rights and the Campaign for Trade Union Freedom in fighting to make that better world possible. I'd now just like to hand over to Carolyn Jones once again, who, as well as being an officer in the Institute and the campaign, is also a leading activist in the People's Assembly. Cad.
Thanks very much, Adrian, and wow, what a wonderful day and show of solidarity from such a wide range of speakers. Struggles, yes, but also victories here and across the world. Great way to start International Workers' Day, May Day. So thanks very much. Supportive messages in chat throughout the meeting from a range of organisations and workplaces, from Vauxhall, from War on One, from PCS in Watford, from Bradford and Shipley. Too many to mention, although I should mention Northwest TUC, if only because it's my region. I know I'm abusing the chair in that sense. Listen, it was great to hear Maxine Peake quote Eleanor Marx and the role she played in helping to form unions, including, as Mick said, the gas workers, the forerunner of the GMB. I'd also like to quote Eleanor, who at the first May Day event in 1890 said, "We will only have ourselves to blame if we do not achieve the victory which this great day could so easily deliver." And I'd add to that, not just a victory that we could deliver, but a victory that is deserved by so many workers and their families. So, as Adrian says, wearing my People's Assembly hat, I would urge all of us here today not to miss the opportunity to demonstrate our anger, our frustration, and our determination to claim victory by supporting the People's Assembly call to take to the streets on the 28th of June. Go to the website, look up the People's Assembly on Facebook, contact your local group for travel details. And if you don't have a local group, comrades, then create one, because that's what it's all about. Let's have a big show of strength and solidarity, and let it be known we demand more for our future. So a big thanks to each and every one of our speakers today. Thanks to all our supporting organisation and our sponsors. Thanks to you, our audience, for joining us on whatever platform you're joining us from. And solidarity to all. Our call is clear. Resist attacks. Repeal the anti-trade union laws. Replace the rotten laws and policies that exploit us daily with a framework of law that recognises and rewards workers and matches those international standards as outlined by Keith. So, great event, everybody. Go out and enjoy some sunshine. Solidarity wishes for May Day. See you all soon.